Hello, everyone. I wanted to talk with you for just a few brief minutes about our two writers for today, Charlotte Perkins Gilman and Edith Wharton. We read a short story by each. Just kind of give you a quick overview of each of those authors and their writings that we read for today. Charlotte Perkins Gilman, we'll begin with her, a very famous feminist writer. The Yellow Wallpaper, she wrote in response to an episode where she was treated for what should have been postpartum depression, most likely, and she should have been, given, some, medical care for that. Instead, she was placed on this rest cure by this Dr. S. Weir Mitchell, and he was one of the most prominent doctors of the time period in the United States. But his method of treating her was basically to tell her just to rest and not do anything, any intellectual activities, anything at all. And it kind of made her kind of feel crazy because she wasn't allowed to have any sort of artistic outlet or do anything of produce anything. And so she wrote this short story in response to that episode in her life where she was treated by Dr. Mitchell, and her hope was to prevent this type of remedies being prescribed by doctors in the future. Um, this story, just a few things I wanted to make sure that you noticed as you were reading. First off is notice the setting. She kind of describes it, as being this, large house that she's in a children's room. She describes it, but in reality, she's describing basically a mental hospital. She talks about on page 832, she says, I should judge, for the windows are barred for little children, and there are rings and things in the walls. The paint and paper looks as if a boys' school had used it. It is stripped off, the paper in great patches all around the head of my bed, about as far as I can reach, and in a great place on the other side of the room, low down. I never saw a worse paper in my life. Um, she's describing basically she's at a kind of a rundown mental hospital, but she thinks of it as a kid's room, and she doesn't realize, the bars on the windows, the shackles on the walls. She doesn't realize what they are. She's thinking of them as, for children to play in. And, that's one of the things to note. Also, note how she continually names another woman there at the house, assuming it to be her husband's sister. And she gives that person a different name throughout the story. On page um, 833, she refers to her as Mary. Then she refers to her as Jenny several different times, being on page 835. And then finally, at the very end of the story, um, she is mentioned as Jane on page 842. So, that kind of makes you think that, the person she describes as her husband's probably not her husband. It's probably the doctor. This is probably not his sister. These are the names, maybe the various nurses who are treating her. We don't know for sure, but this is an unreliable narrator. And so that's something that's important to be aware of as you read the wallpaper is the unreliability of the narrator. Notice as you read what you can understand that maybe she is not fully understanding. So that's something I wanted to mention about the yellow wallpaper as we are reading it. Briefly, also talk about Roman fever. This is a short story by Edith Wharton. Edith Wharton, I think, is one of our more underrated writers. She wrote primarily kind of uh, you think of them as like period pieces of kind of the societal style novels. That is what the type of background Wharton had. Her maiden name was Jones, and her family was so rich that the phrase "keeping up with the Joneses" that comes from Edith Wharton's family. They were that wealthy that the phrase "keeping up with the Joneses" is about her family. She was a notable writer of New York society. If you've, I would, if you get a chance sometime, and if you have HBO Max, check out the series, The Gilded Age. It is by the same writer that did Downton Abbey, and it's very much kind of a Edith Wharton inspired type story. So, and it's got Gilded Age from the term coined by Twain. But Edith Wharton comes from that high society. Most of her writing is about wealthy societal people. She also, towards the end of her life, went to France and lived a significant time there. And she was praised as a hero during World War I for a lot of the assistance she gave to people who were living in the midst of the war. She took in refugees and children and was highly regarded in France because of that during World War I. Roman Fever, the story we read by Wharton, it's about these two wealthy women, both of them widows, who they and their daughters are there in Rome. It is evidently a frequent thing that they've done their entire lives, coming to Rome to visit. Then they lived not too far from each other. At least at one time, they lived close to each other, across the street from each other in New York City, and we see Mrs. Slade and Mrs. Ansley are talking about their daughters. Mrs. Ansley, she has her daughter, Barbara, who is very outgoing, is widely admired. All of the young men want to date her daughter. And then you have Mrs. Slade, and she has her daughter. Whose name is Jenny, who is very much not the outgoing individual that her friend Barbara is. And Mr. Slade's kind of jealous of that because she has kind of always thought of herself as being more interesting than the Ainsleys. And in fact, she had a joke at one time that she made about the Ainsleys that when they moved and would no longer be living next door to the Ainsleys, well, she said, I'd just as soon live across the street from a speakeasy. I might see it raided, meaning the Ainsleys are boring. A speakeasy might be at least entertaining. That was kind of a joke that Mrs. Slade had about the Ainsleys, who she felt were boring. But we find out in the course of this short story, Roman fever is supposedly it's a fever that young women were getting as they went out into the night air of Rome. It's really kind of a euphemism for pregnancy. And we had, oh, uh, Grace, basically her Roman fever wasn't an actual sickness. Now, there were some who'd had sickness, but with Grace, it was basically we find out that Mrs. Slade had written a letter that was supposedly from Delphin, Mr. Slade, that he had written to Grace, and Grace thought the letter was from him. And Mrs. Slade always kind of kept that joke in her mind because she was jealous of any attraction that there might exist between her husband and Grace. And so she had forged this letter from supposedly her future husband, Mr. Slade. But it turns out the joke's on her that and she never expected her that when Grace got the letter that she would answer it back. And so she sends a letter to Delphin, Mr. Slade, and then Delphin and Grace arrange to meet at the Coliseum. And then we find out at the very end, Mrs. Slade is upset now because she realizes she's the one that put them together that night. And so she's like, well, you had one night with him. I had a full lifetime with him. But at that point, Mrs. Ainsley reveals, well, I had Barbara, revealing that Mr. Slade is in fact the father of Barbara, not Mr. Ainsley. And so that's kind of how the story ends. This is kind of a you know, kind of like a soap opera. But it's like this little period drawing room, uh, societal, play of wits, to a certain extent. And, this is kind of what Wharton was known for. Um, Horton's written several well-regarded novels. One of her novels has been adapted, and several of them have been adapted to movies. But The Age of Innocence, that was directed by Martin Scorsese back in the 90s, starring Daniel Day-Lewis, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Winona Ryder. Is a highly regarded film. It's been a while since I've seen it, but that's her works have been adapted quite frequently, and Wharton is one of our great American novelists, very similar to one of the contemporaries I didn't assign, Henry James. They're both very prominent novelists of the late 19th, early 20th century. So that's all for this session, and our next session that we have will be over Stephen Crane and Jack London. So thank you.